Chapter 23: Terrorism. Terrorism as a critical foreign policy concern in the late 20th century. In the late 20th century, terrorism emerged as a critical foreign policy concern for many nations around the world. The end of the Cold War, the rise of globalization, and the shift in political paradigms contributed to a new landscape where non-state actors wielded considerable power. Terrorism, marked by its unpredictable nature and profound impact, required countries to reassess their foreign policies. Terrorism can be defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, often against civilians, in pursuit of political aims. This definition encompasses a wide array of actors and motivations, ranging from nationalist movements to religious extremism. The late 20th century witnessed a rise in terrorist groups that challenged state sovereignty and forced governments to confront these threats directly. Groups like Al-Qaeda, the Irish Republican Army, IRA, and Aum Shinrikyo exemplify the diverse motivations that propel these actors onto the global stage. The late 20th century saw significant geopolitical changes that shaped the development of terrorism. The end of the Cold War in 1989 marked a shift in global power dynamics, contributing to instability in several regions. The disintegration of the Soviet Union led to a power vacuum, and many newly independent states struggled to establish governance. In this context, terrorism emerged as a tool for various groups seeking to assert their legitimacy and gain political footholds. In addition, the globalization of the economy facilitated the spread of ideas and ideologies across borders, enabling terrorist networks to recruit members and plan attacks on a worldwide scale. The increased accessibility of technology and communication tools allowed for more sophisticated planning and execution of terrorist attacks, making the threat even more pronounced. Several key events crystallized the attention of policymakers on terrorism as a crucial foreign policy issue. The 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center in New York City was a harbinger of the magnitude of the threat posed by terror groups. Although the attack was not as destructive as future incidents, it underscored the potential for widespread civilian casualties and the urgent need for sophisticated counterterrorism measures. However, it was the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks that fundamentally reshaped the American and global approach to counterterrorism. Hijacked planes struck the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, resulting in the deaths of nearly 3,000 individuals. This pivotal event led to the United States launching the War on Terror, significantly influencing foreign policy not only in America but across allied nations. In addition, the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, carried out by domestic terrorists, highlighted that the threat of terrorism does not solely originate from international actors. These events forced governments to address both international and domestic terrorism within their policy frameworks, leading to increased surveillance, law enforcement collaboration, and intelligence sharing. The rise of terrorism necessitated a change in foreign policy strategies, particularly for the United States. The doctrine of preemption emerged, suggesting that action could be taken against perceived threats before they materialized. In practice, this led to military interventions in countries such as Afghanistan and Iraq, justified by the need to combat terrorism at its source. Additionally, countries began to develop more elaborate counterterrorism strategies that combined military, intelligence, economic, and diplomatic tactics. The establishment of the Department of Homeland Security in the United States is one example of how nations restructured their internal security apparatus to address the threat of terrorism more effectively. International cooperation also became a focal point in counterterrorism efforts. The United Nations adopted various resolutions aimed at combating terrorism, and countries entered into bilateral and multilateral agreements to enhance intelligence sharing and coordinate responses to terrorist threats. Organizations such as Interpol and Europol emerged as essential platforms for international collaboration on security matters. In the late 20th century, the role of media in terrorism became increasingly evident. Terrorist groups quickly understood the value of propaganda, using media to amplify their messages and instill fear. Events like the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania showcased how terrorists utilized media coverage to gain notoriety and recruit new members. The rise of digital media further transformed the landscape of terrorism by enabling groups to disseminate their ideologies globally. Social media platforms serve as tools for radicalization, recruitment, and operational communication. The ability of terrorist organizations to reach wide audiences poses significant challenges for policymakers, necessitating innovative strategies to counter extremist narratives. Recent developments indicate that terrorism remains a pressing concern for contemporary foreign policy. The rise of ISIS in the early 2010s and its use of social media to recruit fighters and propagate its radical ideology posed new challenges for global security. The group's territorial gains in Iraq and Syria prompted military interventions by a coalition of nations, leading to discussions about the effectiveness and legitimacy of foreign military involvement. Furthermore, the ongoing threat of domestic terrorism has garnered increased attention, especially in the context of radicalization related to identity politics and social movements. The rise of terrorism, motivated by right-wing extremism, as seen in events such as the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand in 2019, has compelled governments to broaden their focus beyond traditional Islamist terrorism. As nations grapple with the complex landscape of modern terrorism, future foreign policy strategies will likely involve a more holistic approach. Addressing the root causes of terrorism, including poverty, political marginalization, and lack of education, will be essential. Additionally, fostering community resilience through dialogue and understanding may help mitigate the risks of radicalization. Terrorism became a critical foreign policy concern in the late 20th century, fundamentally changing how nations respond to security challenges. The geopolitical landscape, propelled by key events and transformations in technology, necessitated a re-evaluation of strategies and collaboration. As the world continues to grapple with various forms of terrorism, the need for comprehensive, innovative approaches remains paramount. Future foreign policy will require addressing the multifaceted nature of terrorism while promoting international cooperation to ensure global security. Al-Qaeda's key attacks, a historical overview. Al-Qaeda, a militant Islamist organization founded by Osama bin Laden in the late 1980s, has left an indelible mark on international relations and global security through a series of high-profile terrorist attacks. On October 23, 1983, a truck bomb exploded at the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut, killing 241 American servicemen. This attack was part of a broader strategy by various militant groups operating in Lebanon during the civil war, including Hezbollah. Though Al-Qaeda was not directly responsible for this bombing, the incident set a precedent for future Islamic jihadist attacks against U.S. military personnel and interests abroad. The bombing demonstrated the vulnerability of American forces in foreign territories and sparked a re-evaluation of U.S. military engagements in the Middle East. On February 26, 1993, 6 individuals affiliated with Al-Qaeda detonated a truck bomb at the underground parking garage of the World Trade Center in New York City. The bombing resulted in 6 deaths and over 1,000 injuries. The attackers sought to cause significant destruction and instill fear in the American populace. Although the bombing fell short of its intended goal of bringing down the towers, it marked Al-Qaeda's first major attack on U.S. soil. This attack served as a wake-up call to American intelligence agencies and law enforcement, indicating that Al-Qaeda was willing to target the United States directly. On June 25, 1996, a truck bomb exploded near the Khobar Towers housing complex in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, killing 19 U.S. servicemen and injuring hundreds.